Welcome to the Worship Circle podcast. This is Todd, and I'm honored to have a friend who I met. Tom, it was 2021. This is Tom Schlosser. You live in Pennsylvania, right?
Yes, I do. Below
What
Pittsburgh.
part? Yeah, what part is it called?
The town I'm in is called Waynesburg.
So it's crazy because we were just at a weekend in Colorado at the same retreat center and monument that I met you in.
Yeah.
And I was going back to, it seems like yesterday, Tom, but I met you in 2021, which is like, that's a while back.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's been, 5 years?
It's been 5 years. And I want people to hear the context of how I met you and also for you to go into how you got involved in this work. But I was invited by Michael Cusick to get away for a weekend with some men who all of us were at a different spot in our life where we realized that some of the ways we'd been living were not the way we wanted to live and present in the world. And we wanted to basically discover more about our story and what had gone on in our life, why it's at certain times it was hard to function in the world and carry some of the things we've been carrying. So just a great time of men to be real and vulnerable and open our hearts up to each other. And you were my small group, one of my small group leaders at the weekend.
I was, yeah.
And I just remember coming into that space. And the reason we're doing this podcast today, Tom, is because you've been on this journey with me in a coaching capacity, just to help me pay attention to just some of the things that are coming up in my body and my life. And as a guy who's been in ministry my whole life, basically on a stage, until I met you, until I went to that weekend, I don't know that I was ever curious about anything more than I'm a new creation in Christ. Mm-hmm. So the old is gone, the new has come. There's no sense in going back and rehashing anything. But you guys were encouraging us to, no, we need to go back. Because there's some things that you might be carrying that you might need to pay attention to. So to have you in that space with a couple other buddies, I just wanted to ask you how you got into this work of just paying attention to people's stories, what their bodies might be trying to tell them. How did you get into this work that you do?
Yeah, great question. It started with my own story.
Right.
I got a degree and I learned all this information and I started helping people. And then I realized I found myself in this place where I was like, man, I can't manage things like I thought I could. And I ended up in, this counseling office, and I'd said, man, I help people walk through this and I can't do it myself. Right. Wow. And so I was engaging my own story. And as I started to engage my own story, I realized I wasn't listening to my body and wasn't listening to what I've been through. And I remember someone asked me like, hey, just go home and just sit for 10 minutes by yourself and just listen. And I remember sitting there, Todd, and listening. And all I could think of was how loud the refrigerator was that I was sitting next to. Right. I was like, why is this thing so loud? And I never I'd never heard a refrigerator before. Right. And I always describe it as like, I always lived in this fog and I couldn't really identify the things around me. And so it really opened up this whole world of like somatics and my body, and that my body carries a story and all these different pieces that I just hadn't thought about before. I had all the information in my head, but never stopped to pay attention to the own story that was unfolding. And so it just led me down this path of just really wanting to find out more and learn more. But really it was through just my own journey that I began. And I attended the same weekend you mentioned. I attended it, back in 2019. And that was also a big, just in this group experience, to be able to have other men hold my story and just hold what I was going through. It's just a powerful way to really find this path of wanting to help other guys and to be more attuned.
That's so good. So just so you guys know, as we talk, it's the weekend we're talking about is with a ministry called Restoring the Soul, Michael Cusick. If you're interested, go to their website. They do 2 a year. It's a transformational time. And so, Tom, for me, I'm sitting in this small group with you and some other guys. And I'm like, I know that there's things in my life that feel like they're not right. And yet I've been able to manage my world, manage ministry, manage as best as I know how as a man in the world. And I just remember being in that group with you, and you were so good at. I remember you looking me in the eyes and kind of getting down right in front of me, and you were talking about paying attention to your body. And part of me, for everybody listening, is like, why should we pay attention to our body? Like,
Right.
especially in the church world, our body is like, man, that's evil. Sin reigns in your mortal flesh, and you shouldn't pay attention to it, and
Right.
you should deny it. And here you're going, man, it tells a story.
Yeah.
And we talk about, and we would bring up some things that in our family of origin or things that happened as we were growing up that were what we would say traumatic things that happened. And as I unload this stuff and tell this story, and you guys, as my brothers sat around, you're like, man, you're carrying so much grief.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the tears just started coming. Part of it was what I was living in at the moment, and part of it was what had happened to me growing up, and this idea that we've all been harmed, that the enemy's made it his job to take us down since the day we were born, and God said, they're for my glory, and he's like, no, I'm going to harm them. And so from that, I remember reaching out to you just in a coaching capacity and say, man, would you be with me on this journey? Like, could we check in every now and then, and you help me pay attention to some of the stuff. But one of the things that, as we go back to that small group that I wanted to bring up for people listening is you, I remember walking away from that as like part of my healing journey was going to be paying attention to little Todd.
Yeah. Yep.
I remember when you said little Todd, I just started bawling, and I was like, I remember that guy, I remember, and what happened to him? Did I leave him somewhere? And the last day you said, hey, I think little Todd needs to come out and play. And I just lost it, and you guys all held me. And I remember going home going, man, what are some toys I can get back into? What are some things I can do that would... So talk a little bit about how that plays into everybody's story. Like with the work that you do at the weekend and in other capacities, is it common for humans... we're talking about people that are in ministry to not pay attention to that little kid, like leave them behind and forget how to play and forget, part of their glory that was coming alive, that was bright and radiant before harm happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think so much of the narrative that we believe about ourselves, right, gets shaped over time and gets shaped from when we're really young. And so from a body standpoint, right, like what are kids... Most of the time, what are kids really good at doing? Well, they're good at play, right? Like you go to a playground and you see these kids, like you give them a jungle gym and 30 minutes, and they've created this whole scenario of a pirate ship or robbers, or, they have this brain that's able to just go and play and envision this whole world, right? And then like as adults, like we lose that. And you're like, how do we lose that when our brain is supposed to be actually better as we get older, right? Like they're fully formed. And so that's one thing I like to do is ask that question, because it's been asked myself. It's like, I remember when someone said to me, what does little Tom want to do? And I remember one time just being like, I don't know. I think he wants to go bowling. And me and a group of friends went bowling. And so it's such a fun way to engage the body and engage the story, right? And really awaken something that sometimes we lose track of because of, like, as you mentioned, when harm happens, or when just as our story unfolds, we lose touch with that, right?
Yeah.
And so like being able to find that, because our body remembers, right? Our body remembers that first video game you got as a kid, or, whatever that the imagination is, or the memory is that activates that thing. Like when I was 10, man, all I wanted was this, right? And then as an adult, like when you re-engage it, that awakens again.
Yeah. For those of you listening going, why are we talking about this? Because I and Tom witnessed this through some work with Tom and some others. I'm 56 years old, and I'm finally coming back to the real me that God intended. And as a worship leader, Tom, I remember telling you, I remember the trip it happened. I was like, man, I went out of town to Low Country Community Church. I just had an acoustic guitar and I led these people, and it was so freeing just to be me.
Mm-hmm.
And The reason we're talking about this, Tom, and you can attest to this, is that I think a lot of us have not paid attention to our body, have not paid attention to where we've come from, forgot or don't even know the glory of what God originally thought up in our story and the one unique life we get, and harm happens. And what does it look like? You talk a lot about body, and I want to help people understand this. What does it look like for someone to not pay attention? Like some people are listening to this going, how do I pay attention to my body? Like,
Sure. Yeah.
what does it look like for someone to live in a way where they're absolutely not paying attention to what their body is screaming to say? Like, I know some guys I talk to are like, man, I'm in a mega church and I'm so anxious. I don't know what to do with it. My heart's racing and I can't breathe some days, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so are you asking like how to stop and pay attention?
Yeah, like, so we're talking about being in a small group. You're talking about little Todd. We're talking about trauma. And what can our body tell us in present day for those listening? Like, what are some signs that you're like, man,
Yeah.
this is normal for me. And yet my body's screaming and I'm not paying attention to it because I've thought this was normal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that the key thing you just stated is like recognizing what our normal is, right? Like, cause we all exist in this day-to-day life and think the way I experienced it is normal because it is, right? Because that I live in my body, and from age whatever to present day, this has been my normal, right? And for someone to stop and say, hey, I wonder if the headaches you have aren't just headaches. Right. Peter Scazzaro in Emotionally Healthy Spirituality is the first time I heard that years ago. And I was like, oh, because I had headaches a lot my whole life. Right. But I just thought it was normal. I thought like a 8 out of 10 headache was normal on a regular day basis. Right. Like, come to find out, like, there's people that don't have headaches, Todd, and I had no idea. Right. So we all have that, right? Like the tightness and all of this. And so to some degree, it is just starting to slow down and ask the questions that you're asking. Just what is my body feeling? And I wonder if it's not normal.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's, going back to that, you and I both attending this weekend and being in a group of people, right? And having a group of people go, what, that sounds like that you're carrying a lot. And for me, and for you and I both to go, right? Oh no, this is normal. This is okay. And then for someone to go, no, time out. That's not okay. Right. Like, and I think that's why community is so important and having people to be engaged with it.
Yeah. Talk a little bit, Tom, about the idea of the window of tolerance, because you brought that up with me.
Yeah.
And as we talk about body awareness, we talk about paying attention to what our body might say. I always tell it like this because I think people can relate. When I was, on staff at North Point years ago, if I would get an email from somebody that was like, should have been a conversation, in person, like I would find that I would get the email, I would read it, and my body would literally start. I could feel something in me like turning into the Hulk, like the old Hulk show, or Bruce Banner gets hit with gamma radiation and your body's like, like this, there's this vibration going on. And I know my immediate reaction back then would have been, man, I got to fire an email back as soon as possible. I got to let this person know that what they did was wrong, the way they said it was wrong. And with working with you and your coaching, I've been able to pay attention to what my body's telling me. So what's just that idea from your perspective of what does it look like for those listening and to go, man, I live in this every day. What's my body going to be telling me in some of those situations? And what does that feel like where I need to just stop and pause? Right.
Yeah. Well, I think the idea first is to just identify that we have this window that we can be in, right? And the window is a place Chuck DeGroat talks about in his book about being at home. And so think about like when I'm at home with myself and with my body, meaning I feel regulated, I'm aware, right? So that's a key word, is like I'm aware of where I'm at and I can name things. So home doesn't mean we don't feel things or that I'm absent of that. It just means that I'm able to recognize when that's happening. And now the hard part is like that window for some of us can be really small, which means I can exist there, but only for a short time. And my nervous system, my body can get thrown out of that pretty quickly. Ergo, I get an email and I immediately have this reaction to it, right? And so being able to recognize that, like, okay, I'm out of that window. And so what do I need to get back in the window? Now, none of us really ever think that. We always just go, now I'm in this heightened state, which the author would say, Chuck DeGroat would say, hey, now we're in storm, like the storm response. So that's like this anxiety or anger, low level stress. And so with that, right, like we go, okay, how do I then respond in that? And I typically, I fire back an email, or I say something I shouldn't say, or I shut down, right? Like, or then I just ignore it, right? So our body has all these different responses that happens. And so I think paying attention to that reality is that, like, I wonder what life would be like if we actually were aware of this home space that we could get in,
right,
and be able to respond from home. So if I'm out of that window, to go, okay, hey, can I get back into home before I say or do something? Or to recognize that I'm super anxious, overwhelmed, or shutting down. What do I need, right? That the thing you said earlier, asking the question, okay, what does Todd need right now, to then get back into that window and then maybe respond in a different space.
So good. So those of you listening, Window of Tolerance. You can read. There's maybe name a couple of books. I know Andy Colbert has a book on.
Andy. She
Andy
has a book
Colbert.
called Try Softer.
Yeah,
talks
really
about
good
it.
With that.
Chuck DeGroat that I mentioned, Healing What's Within. He kind of talks about it from a different angle, but they're both really good resources to help give language around kind of this idea of the body.
If you want to be a more authentic worship leader, read these books. That's what's crazy about this work, Tom. It's like you can't, and Jesus paid attention to this body. So now we're going to transition to what I think we're going to call this podcast is What Do I Need?
Oh, sure. I love that.
I was like, let's just call it What Do I Need? So I remember you asked me that on one of our early sessions. You're like, what does Todd need? And man, I felt like that was the most selfish thing in the world I'd ever heard to ask myself.
Yeah.
I still struggle with like that, because my whole life I believed that deny yourself, deny your wants, deny your desires, push through, work harder, more hours, more campuses, more songs. And that's one of the biggest reasons I wanted to have you on, is this idea of how do we pay attention to what does that even mean? What could it look like on a day-to-day basis? And it's like, why have we relegated that question to be so selfish when in fact it's what Jesus did? Like, hey, I need to rest. I'm going to go rest, it's like, I think my dream for this podcast would be that we tackle this, what do I need? And we make it a sacred question.
Love that.
And that people could walk away going, man, I never thought about it that way. So I'm going to pay attention to what I need. So in your mind, with all the work you've done with different people, all the coaching you've done, and what comes up for you with just somebody's journey like me of going, that's a stupid, selfish question, Tom. Why are you asking me that?
Yeah.
To I want to become somebody who's more healthy and that can ask myself and pay attention to that, so that the people on the other side of me benefit from a more whole and healed Todd.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think first it's just going, man, I don't like the question.
Yeah.
Right. Like just being able to be honest with ourselves and go, I don't know. Like I ask it all the time and I still struggle with it, but I keep asking it. Right. And I think that's so much of it is, especially when we grow up in a world where that question feels selfish and it feels like I can't, have permission to even consider that, to begin to say, no, I do have permission and that I am able and allowed to ask it, and then to explore it, right? Like, so I think the first thing you do is to explore the reaction you have to it, right? Yeah. Like if I, again, like when I asked you, like, Todd, what do you need? And then to explore, like, why am I having this reaction to it? And starting to name some of that, I think can be really helpful, because it helps create the story that's behind why that question is hard. Yeah. Right. But then going back to, I love to ask this question of like, well, okay, if you were 6 years old, what did a 6-year-old need in this situation that we're talking about? Right. And like 9 times out of 10, we go super simple. Like, I needed a hug, man. I need a snack, right? I need some water. Because we overthink it way too much. Like, think about a 4-year-old. What does a 4-year-old need? They just need to take a nap,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And just that really simplicity of really being able to start there and then build
Yeah.
upon that, right? Because I think that's the simple things is what we miss, is really what our body, heart, soul, mind are really trying to tell us through what the body is communicating to us.
Man, that's so good. I think about sometimes you would ask me that, and I would be like, I need a steak tonight. You
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
And when you said that, Tom, you mentioned the hug.
Yeah,
We were just at a weekend in Colorado, and there was a guy in the group that, we were going around kind of sharing how we were doing. And Michael said, looks like you need a hug. And I remember when Michael gave this guy a hug, I got really emotional.
yeah,
And I think every guy in the room was like, man, we all long for that.
right,
Yet we've been these guys that have been bowed up, put on a protective armor.
right.
And what would it look like in the world that we live in with ministry to say, man, John Lynch said this quote, and we've talked about it. We can't be loved unless we have needs. And to voice those needs is a way to allow other people to love us. And that's a very sacred and holy thing. And it's hard as heck for all of us to do.
Right. Yes.
What does that bring up for you as I talk about that for you in your life? Just with, I need to tell Kristen I have a need, your wife, or I need to
Yeah.
say this to somebody. That's got to be like, how do you go from, just what's your experience with voicing your needs to people that you care about?
Yeah. Well, I always say I'm a recovering people pleaser.
Yeah.
So I'm great at asking what other people need, but terrible at looking in the mirror and going, Tom, what do you need? And so much of the practice for me has been to take that vulnerability step and saying out loud to someone like, I need you. I actually have a phone call this afternoon with a buddy that is part of this weekend. And I said to him at the weekend, I said, I need to call you more for me,
Yeah.
not to check in on you. Is that okay? And I knew he would say that, right? But I needed to say it out loud. And so the practice for me is really the voice of it, right? Like to be able to say, I need to talk to someone and I need to do it more regularly because I'm prone to check in on everybody else except for me.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been, and with my wife too, like just to be able to say, she's away on a work trip this weekend. And for me, just to say, hey, I just miss you and I can't wait for you to come back, right? Like I need to voice that. I need to share that there's some sadness that she's away, right? And I think that as that people pleaser in me, I would have defaulted to the just checking on her and making sure she was okay.
Man, that's good. What do you've seen a lot of people come through, Tom, in small groups that you've worked with Restoring the Soul and other capacity just with the work you do in Pennsylvania. But I mean, how common is it for people to not be able to connect the dots between how their present day reality is manifesting itself, the way they behave in the world, and that they had some really deep harm
Mm,
that they've not ever been curious about?
yeah.
Just talk about, is that the norm? Like most people don't know how connected
Right.
the story of their family of origin is, the story of their life, and how they behave in present day.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, it's so hard, right? Like because it's hard to connect because as we were talking earlier about what our normal is, our story is what's normal, right? And so I
Yeah.
think it's really hard, especially from the body standpoint. And I think that's why I know you and I have talked a lot about story work, and you've done a lot of story work with
Yeah.
some other people. I think that's why that's so important to engage that because the body is a good place to stop and pause and to begin to pay attention, and then the story work and really helping that unfold can help really connect those dots because it's just so hard because we live in our own bodies and we have almost these proverbial blinders on that
Right.
we just exist. And then depending on how we grew up, what we're told about ourselves, about sin and about our body and about flesh really does shape a way in which we do that. And so, but I think that's what's so powerful about conversations like this is just to
Mm.
be able to be invited to this idea that we can stop and pause and go, I wonder if there's a connection here.
Wow. You talk, one of the things you've taught me, and you've been at the Pastor Circle retreat now for 3 years.
Yeah.
and our buddy Kevin Tracy has been the past 2 years. But one of the things that you work with us when we're at the retreat with pastors is breathing. And I wanted to kind of hit on this because I didn't realize what a tool it could be to help with what we're talking about. So just Tom and I talking about this just out loud, we're kind of riffing here, as John Eldridge would say. He says that all the time. But imagine you get the email or you have the person burst in your office and just dress you down. And they walk out and your body's shaking. And you're feeling this anxiety in your chest, this tightness, and you know something's wrong. And Tom, you would say to me, Todd, your body is telling you something.
Sure.
And it's probably activated something that happened before that person came in your office and dressed you down that is part of your story, right? So your body is in present day feeling a familiar thing that it felt with something that you felt years ago. But then we have this gift of oxygen and breathing and what the body can do to bring itself back into being present to this window of tolerance you're talking about. So just share a little bit about your experience with breathing and maybe some thoughts around so listeners can go, man, I was activated yesterday when my direct report, said this to me. And instead of calming down and doing what we're about to talk to them about with breathing, I just, stormed out of my office and I went and let somebody else have it,
Right.
What would it look like to stop, look, and listen and then breathe? And what does breathing look like? And what does it do to our body?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Because I think the thing to remember with this is that, especially with breathing, it's going to be really hard to do that in those moments.
Okay.
Right. I remember I had someone come in my office and they were like, I just had a panic attack and the breathing didn't work. And I was like, wait, the breathing's not going to work in the middle of a panic attack.
Right.
It's going to, we still want to do it, but the breathing practice is really helpful outside of these moments to help us then when we're in those moments. And it is just this slowing down and paying attention. Now, I always offer this caveat with breathing because breathing can be very vulnerable. And you might go, but don't we do it all the time? Well, yeah, we do it all the time. But like when we actually slow down to feel, it can be too overwhelming for the body. So first off, you got to just recognize that piece, that if it's too overwhelming, there's kind of some other things we can gauge it and there's some other work that you can do. But if you are going to start to breathe, I really start real basic is just pay attention to your breath and see where it's at. And a simple thing I like to do is just put your hand on your chest. Right. If you just put your hand on your chest and just bring attention to it, that helps. And the touch point also begins to signify to my body, hey, I'm here, I'm present.
Yeah.
Right. And then you recognize that. And then I like to do gentle breathing. Here's the thing, there's a lot of breathing stuff out there. And so, part of this is finding what works for you. For me, it's just in through the nose, out the mouth. Right. Can I just take some breaths? Can I breathe in? Pause for a second or two, and then breathe out. And I like to emphasize, Todd, that when you breathe out is to breathe out a little longer than you breathe in.
Yeah.
Right. When you breathe out, it does activate a part of our body that's the rest and digest part. And so breathing out a little bit longer does help move the needle a little bit down. Right. And so breathing is going to be, if we can move the needle 1 or 2 degrees, that's a win when it comes to breathing. Right. We're not looking at like this complete reset. I struggle with language like that. What we're trying to do is just identify this kind of states that we're in and allow our body to move through it, help us name what's going on. What's the activation in our body? I like that word a lot. Like, why is my body activated right now? And then can I just be able to be aware and attuned to name what's going on and begin to slow down and regulate, right? The goal isn't to go from from 100 to 0, right? Like that's not really realistic. It's not how our bodies work anyways.
Yeah.
Right. But can I introduce kind of a different type of flow with it?
Yeah. One of the things that you brought to my attention, and we'll kind of wrap up with this, Tom, is this idea. And I remember seeing it when we were in small group, but you had us tap arms crossed, and we were tapping left and right shoulders, or tapping on our knees left and right.
Yeah.
And then you talked to me about this concept called bilateral stimulation and what it does to heal the brain.
Yeah.
And So you guys are listening, you can check bilateral stimulation. But one of the things that's really helped me, and just as we're trying to throw out tools for people to pay attention to what they need in their body, is just walking.
Mm-hmm.
Just that step, left, right, and the repetitiveness of that every day. It over time, it's a healing thing for the brain.
Yeah.
And I just remember going back in time. It's like, man, if you're working in an office cubicle and you're at a church, man, take some time to take calls outside and go for a long walk.
Yeah.
It's so much better. And all these things we're talking about, the breathing, the being still. I mean, we didn't really hit on silence and solitude, but those all help our body become more sensitive to paying attention to the reality of what we've been carrying in our story, and how we're able to operate with the people we lead in a service, the people we work with, our family at home. Yeah. Any closing thoughts as we wrap up? Because I'm like, we could spend hours talking about different topics.
And
but
I appreciate the opportunity, Todd. I think to wrap up, what I would say is, like, give yourself the freedom to ask the question, hey, what do I need? Right. And when it comes to the breathing and body stuff, it's just be willing to try some stuff, right? Like, all of us are different in how God created us. And I love that. And we got to be able to find what works, right? And so if something doesn't work, like, it's okay. And, I always use that phrase, like, you throw spaghetti on the wall and see if it sticks.
Yeah.
Right? Like, find what sticks for you, find what works, and just begin to pay attention and slow down, right? Like, that's what I did. I go back to that first time when I was told just to sit for 10 minutes. And it's really launched me into a decade of getting to find all these fun things out that are just engaging and create community around it.
Love it. Well, man, thank you for being a good witness to my tears, my grief, my hope, my dreams, my desires, my joy over the past, man, almost 5 years. It's like crazy. But I wouldn't have become who I am now and continue on this path of healing without you in my life, Tom. So thanks for all you've done, and continue. You're going to be helping the pastors this year. You guys, I know you're in a small group with some of the guys, you and Kevin. So for those pastors listening, if you're like, man, some of this resonated with me, reach out, pastorcircle.com. And for you worship leaders, worshipcircle.com. We start small groups next year. We've got some other fun things coming up this year with our summit. But Tom, thank you for your life, and for you and Kristen and all God has y'all doing, and just the gift you've been to me and so many guys that have processed their story on this journey.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for being with us.
Absolutely.